People We Meet on Vacation, the first adaptation of Emily Henry's books, has just been released on the most popular streaming platform, Netflix. Emily Henry is an extremely popular author, but her books divide opinions. Some people have rediscovered their love for literature because of her, while others can't understand the hype. However, it is undeniable that she's a huge literary phenomenon. She has published one book per year since 2020, and all of them have become bestsellers. But how did this writer rise to fame in such a short period of time? And can she live up to the expectations of reviving the rom-com genre? Well, let's analyze the Emily Henry phenomenon. Although her first contemporary romance, Beach Read, was published in 2020, the massive success began in 2021, right after she published People We Meet on Vacation. A Penguin article explains that Emily and her editor were confused by a sudden spike in sales. And then some friends told her that she was trending on BookTok. And ever since, her popularity has continued growing. A Today article published in early 2025, so almost a year ago, stated that Henry had sold over 9 million copies in the US only. So why do readers love her books so much? Well, I've been watching some TikToks because that is the platform where she's most popular, and I found that in most reviews, people focus on the characters. Readers specified whether they liked the female protagonist, how much they identified with her, and how swoon-worthy was the male love interest. So there is a lot of projection, which is typical for the romance genre. Besides how much they identify with the characters, many of Emily Henry's fans discuss the novel's tropes. You'll usually hear something like, "This was a great enemies to lovers," or "I hate second chance romance," or something along those lines. I even found similar observations in reviews published in cultural magazines. For example, regarding the success of Beach Read, Allison Davis wrote for Vulture. It is a standard romance, but embedded in the enemies to lovers, small town, and opposites attract tropes. In the last couple of years, an over-reliance on tropes has developed. On the one hand, these themes and character types are easy ways for readers to identify stories they might enjoy. But on the other hand, tropes can simplify literary works to a worrying degree. For example, when people say Pride and Prejudice is the original enemies to lovers, they ignore fundamental aspects of the novel that exceed the romantic interactions between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. I also think it becomes problematic when tropes stop being a simple way to recommend books and become the driving force of a story. And let me preface this video by saying that I wanted to like Emily Henry's books, but I couldn't. However, it's not my intention to ruthlessly criticize her writing and the adaptation. I'm making this video to analyze the Emily Henry phenomenon and to try and provide a critical analysis of why I think her stories are not great romances, but work anyway. Let people enjoy things. A disclaimer. I think contemporary romances, rom-coms, women's fiction, whatever you want to call them, should be analyzed as what they are: sweet entertainment and not groundbreaking art, most times. However, I believe it's still important to engage critically with entertainment. But when trying to analyze pop culture, we constantly hear the phrase, "let people enjoy things." Actually, I'm pretty sure that if this video gets enough views, someone will comment that. I think this phrase is a consequence of a time on the internet and in society in general where common discourse was very cruel towards entertainment, especially books or movies oriented to girls and women. We've all heard the Twilight criticism that wasn't actually analyzing it. It was just attacking the young girls who enjoyed it, my 12-year-old self included. However, this idea of letting people enjoy things has expanded in recent years to the point of creating a sort of toxic positivity. In the article, "Don't Let People Enjoy Things," Kate Wagner writes, "An issue common to all of our Let People Enjoy Things posters is that they think criticism means forbidding people from enjoying media in general. I introduced this radical idea. you can still enjoy things while being critical of them. It can even lead to a greater appreciation of societal and historical context. And regarding misogyny, I think we should be allowed to analyze the media women produce and consume, because there is fair and genuine criticism that isn't originated by a desire to police everything women do, but rather to understand why we do it. So at least hear me out before commenting, let people enjoy things. The book, Tropes over Plots. I actually started reading People We Meet on Vacation like a year ago, after finishing a particularly long and complex novel, because I felt like reading something sweet, cute, and entertaining. And I genuinely wanted to like Emily Henry's books. I wanted to enjoy things. But that was my main issue. I felt so bored while reading this book that I couldn't finish it. However, after a couple of months, I decided to give Emily Henry another chance. I had heard some people saying that her books were kind of a hit or miss, and disliking one didn't mean that you wouldn't enjoy the next one. So I decided to read Book Lovers, and I had a similar experience. I did finish it, and I think overall it is a bit better than People We Meet on Vacation, but I think they share many of the same issues. Then, in anticipation of the first Emily Henry adaptation, I reread People We Meet on Vacation and I finished it. So now I can share my thoughts. I'll start strong. I think this book doesn't have a clear plot. It feels more like a series of episodes that connect popular BookTok tropes on a vacation background. The story alternates timelines. In the present day, the protagonists, Poppy and Alex, are trying to reconnect by restarting their tradition of going on holiday after a mysterious fight affected their friendship 2 years prior. And then some flashbacks show us fragments of the vacations they shared in the past. But besides the memories of previous holidays and the series of not so fun activities they do in their current trip to Palm Springs, there's not much action. They seem to drift apart and together over and over again until the last 5 pages without a clear plot to give a strong foundation to the story. I think this is one of the consequences of an excessive reliance on tropes. This is a friends to lovers, so the novel simply narrates the series of events that led these friends to become lovers. Because of the lack of action, the novel heavily relies on dialogue. This might be more of a personal preference, but I don't love the "don't talk to me before I've had my morning coffee" type of millennial humor that shapes every interaction in this book. Most times, it felt like the characters were trying to include me in their inside jokes, but I was just third wheeling. To break down the constant dialogue, often random objects or actions are described, but it doesn't add anything to the story. Really, there were times when I was reading about Poppy walking to the bathroom and I couldn't help but think, Emily, girl, are you trying to hit a word count? Another issue I identified, as I mentioned, is that the book relies on the readers identifying with the main characters. But when that doesn't happen and you're not vicariously living a love story through a fictional character, you can get bored. Because, well, at least in this case, there's no substantial plot to keep you entertained. And you might think, this is a romance, so experiencing a love story through a fictional character is the only point of it. Well, I don't agree. I think a good romance book can be entertaining and moving and culturally relevant even if you don't identify with the characters. But it would need a plot to achieve that, and other elements like social critique or a philosophical perspective, for example. I know many contemporary romances don't offer any of that, but even the most lighthearted love stories need something to work, an obstacle, or multiple ones. It is kind of generally agreed that traditional romances have a happy ending, but for that to be satisfactory, there needs to be some stakes. But who's the bad guy in this story? A faulty air conditioning? Of course, there doesn't need to be a bad guy or girl in a romance, but there has to be a serious obstacle to generate intrigue and tension. And literally, one of their main and only inconveniences in their trip to Palm Springs is a faulty AC. and a flat tire. But that doesn't generate enough tension to build up a satisfactory resolution. I think Emily Henry might have been so committed to the idea of creating a cozy, comforting story that she rejected the possibility of developing a serious conflict. And you might be thinking, there is a real obstacle. Yes, the main issue with Alex and Poppy is that they want different lifestyles. And that is a decent point. It is a real reason why couples don't work out. However, in the book, when this problem is presented, it is automatically dismissed. In chapter 16, Alex tells Poppy that he wants a suburban lifestyle in their hometown, and he thinks she doesn't want the same, so they wouldn't be able to have a future together. However, Poppy clearly tells him that she doesn't dislike the idea. She says, "I don't think that stuff is unbearable. I don't think any of it is unbearable. So if they love each other so much, why don't they get together?" Because their real issue is miscommunication, the only trope authors are not willing to admit is present in their books. It's so frustrating when the main issue with two adults in love is that they can't express their feelings for each other. And in this case, I think it's even more annoying than in other scenarios because they're friends. So how is it possible that they didn't have a vulnerable conversation in like the 12 years they've known each other? And how are we supposed to believe that they will have a long-lasting happy ending when even before starting a romantic relationship, they have such blatant communication issues? Well, because they both start therapy for the first time when they're like over 30? That's insane. But seriously, miscommunication is a common obstacle in love stories because it's not overly dramatic and it seems to be easily solvable. I think many contemporary romance authors just want to create escapist, comforting stories. And because of that, they are scared of complex problems like class or race issues, for example. To finish my review of this book, I will turn to the words of an Emily Henry lover. While researching for this video, I found a Substack article by Rani titled "Can Emily Henry Write Her Way Out of the Box BookTok Built?", where she develops an interesting theory. She believes that when Emily Henry started her career, she tried to combine escapist pleasure with genuine emotional depth. But her success led her to create lighthearted stories driven by tropes. Rani explains, "Betrayed resists lightness, but for many, what lingered wasn't the depth, but the quips. The marketing emphasized enemies to lovers and opposites attract. BookTok clips highlight flirty exchanges, not the long passages where January wonders whether her father's choices have tainted the ecstatic joy of her childhood." Faced with this disconnect between what she'd written and what readers celebrated, Henry siphoned off Beach Read's praise, then set about recreating it line by line. The result, People We Meet on Vacation, amplifies all the wrong elements. Emily Henry's books seem to be determined by fan-pleasing, which can compromise literary quality. Regarding this, the writer said the following in a recent interview with Glamour. They asked her, "How do you want to challenge yourself in the next 5 years?" And she responded, "I think I need to write something that I'm unsure if my existing readers will like. That's the scariest thing. I want to do something speculative or something darker. That's going to be hard for me as a people pleaser to accept that you don't get control over how people are going to feel about anything, especially when you're making a departure. But you've got to grow." But the People We Meet on Vacation movie for sure isn't a departure. If anything, it is the perfect combination of BookTok tropes with the rom-com formula. But does that generate a good movie? The movie, a good old rom-com. This movie made me giggle. Tom Blythe might have something to do with that. It's been only a week since its release, but some fans are saying that it will single-handedly bring rom-coms back, while many critics consider that it doesn't bring anything new to the overused rom-com formula. The adaptation of People We Meet on Vacation is faithful to the overall structure and sentiment of the book, but there are many changes that I consider interesting in terms of how an entertaining narrative is created. First of all, I think it was the right move to modify the Palm Springs scenes to just focus on the wedding of Alex's brother. In the movie, this happens in Barcelona, but regardless of the setting, what took place in the book in their current holiday was atrociously boring. Are you gonna tell me the best they could do to rekindle their friendship was going to a dinosaur gift shop and driving around for hours just looking at houses? Most importantly, the story overall feels tighter. And of course, that will happen when you have to condense like a 400-page novel into a 2-hour-long movie. But by doing so, they resolved a significant issue of the book, which was an abundance of unnecessary scenes, dialogues, and descriptions. By combining the essence of the novel with the rom-com formula, they achieved a more dynamic pacing, which prevents you from feeling bored even if you don't identify with the characters. The screenwriters also tried to create a greater obstacle, probably because they knew that a faulty AC, a flat tire, and a lack of communication weren't strong enough. They did this by combining several elements of the book into one scene and by adding an almost cheating situation, which made the characters a bit messier than they were in the book. And while this created more tension, many viewers had the same opinion as I did while reading the book. Benjamin Lee wrote in his review for The Guardian, "The script can find a way to justify why the pair wouldn't just be together from the get-go, and every belated attempt to stop them from realizing their connection feels as strained as any attempt to bring humor to the story." Ouch. Relatable fantasies. Before we finish, can I just point out how in the book and the movie, they don't really meet anyone on vacation? Like, what relevant character do they meet? Buck? After reading 2 of Emily Henry's books and watching this movie, I can say that her stories are fantasies in an age of relatability. We're not getting sexy and moody billionaires chasing 21-year-old virgins anymore. At least the 2 male love interests I read about were regular middle-class men who were not psychologically or physically abusive towards the protagonist, which is a breath of fresh air. So I understand the appeal, but I still believe that as long as stories are driven by tropes and a profound desire to create perfectly pleasing escapist fantasies, we won't read or watch great romances. Film and literature have always maintained a close relationship, and in an era where the commercial success of books is highly determined by the trending topics on TikTok, it is inevitable to see movies in which traditional formulas are combined with popular tropes. I'm sure that in the next few years we will see more and more of these films. My question is, will we remember any of them in a couple of decades? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.